Young living is a place where the modern and traditional worlds can come together. Dr. Oli Wenker is a living, breathing example of this. His story ranges from beach bum to medical doctor to young living speaker and brand partner. We are happy to have him on the podcast to hear his unique perspective on how his essential oil passion fits in with his science know-how. Hello and welcome to Young Living's podcast, The Wild Drop. My name is Jacob Young, your host. Young Living is a world leader in producing and distributing premium essential oils, and this podcast will provide you with drops of information about Young Living, including stories, history, product information, lots of little fun facts, and even more. Today, Oli Wenker is with us remotely. Welcome, Dr. Oli.
Yes, hello, Jacob. It's an honor to be here, especially because we know each other quite well. And an absolute honor to be there with you on this podcast.
Well, we are super honored to have you on here, especially with your background, which I would love for you to kind of share if you don't mind.
Well, so I'm from Switzerland, born and raised in Zurich, and was on my own pretty early on in my life, became a kind of beach bum hippie. I mean, it was after all in the 60s and 70s when I grew up. And that really kind of formed me for my life later on. And then I encountered my wife very early in my life. And the moment I saw her, I asked her what her last name is. And she said it and said, "Why do you want to know that?" And I said, "Because I want to know the name of my future in-laws." And that was after about 20 seconds. And so she didn't understand what's happening to her. I knew it right there and then. And so she had a big part and still does today on what I do, why I do it, and how I do it. And then about 5-6 years down the road, being a couple, she kind of asked me what I want to be. And I said, well, what I always been. I do ski acrobatics and I paint women on the beaches. And I'm going to be, a free spirit and a painter and an artist and all that. And she had different opinion on that and said, well, if I want to have a chance to marry her, I should have a real profession. And by the way, if you hear dogs, we rescue dogs. So every podcast Zoom has dogs in the background. It's just the way it is when you do something with me like that. Well, and then I said, okay, so if you don't want me to be an artist, what do you want me to be? And then she thought a little bit about and said, a doctor. And I said, fine, okay. So I went to med school. So that was my calling into medicine. Pretty interesting, right? I mean, so I'm not the Albert Schweitzer who originally wanted to help the world, although that has changed a little bit. And then I went really into school medicine. So I'm a physician from Switzerland. I specialized on emergency medicine, rescue with helicopters, rescue with scuba diving, rescue in burning houses, SWAT teams. I was the medical director of a SWAT team protecting VIPs going around the world. Had probably about 30 or 40 very well-known politicians, musicians, VIPs left and right under my care. And I was doing complete hospital medicine. I was sold to it when my wife came with an essential oil to me. I didn't know what it was and basically told me I should smell that. I just said, why did you even think about that? I mean, how can that work? Although I kind of have a hippie background, so I should have been open to that. But the hippie turned into a physician. She cut my hair, my wife, and put the tie on me and all that stuff. So I turned really into a school traditional medicine physician. And And so from there, we kind of took it. And I really turned around because me being the scientist, I went into the medical literature. And so I started reading. And then suddenly I became a speaker for Young Living out of kind of nowhere. I was invited by someone that that used to work at Young Living. The person asked me to come and talk, and I thought I would talk at the University of Utah. I had no idea it was Young Living. And then when I was told it was Young Living, I had no idea what it was. And I went to my wife and said, hey, Young Living Essential Oils asked me to talk. And she said, yeah, come with me to the bathroom. Look at your toothpaste. And I looked at my toothpaste and said, yeah, I never could figure out why someone would call a toothpaste thieves. It just didn't make sense. But I was using Thieves toothpaste for years. And I just it wasn't one of those things that you look at every day and you don't understand. nobody ever explains it to you. And I just thought it was stupid. But I mean, hey, the toothpaste was good, so it was good. So anyway, so this was my kind of entry into Young Living and my past. And so I have 5, 6, maybe 7. I need to look at specialty titles in medicine, specialist in integrative medicine, holistic medicine, regenerative medicine, anesthesiology, intensive care medicine, emergency medicine. And so I'm a little ADD. So every 5, 6, 7 years, I add another title, typically something like that when I get bored. Anyway, so this is how I came to be. And then I got the offer to come for 1 year to the United States to write a paper, an article, a medical article, and then go back and take over one of the universities in Switzerland. 2 of them were kind of trying to get me there. And so we came here with nothing, just 2 little kids and a couple of suitcases, my wife and I. And after a few months, my wife and the kids said they want to stay. And so I never went back to Switzerland. That was 30 years ago, and now I'm here 30 years.
And you currently reside in Texas, correct?
I reside in Texas, and I retired at the top of my career at the age of 56, which I think is not a bad thing. If it's not about the money, but about, being good at what you do. And so this is the time when I started transitioning from really traditional school medicine, just prescribing 10, 20 medication and just believing only in pharmaceuticals, to looking at these oils and plant extracts. And that was my journey of losing over 90 pounds, was, of course, food and lifestyle and epigenetics, a big word again, but it basically means how do you take the environment and the way you live your life to turn on and off genes that will then make you either healthy or sick. And that's a little leftover from the last hospital I worked. It's called MD Anderson Cancer Center. And they were at the forefront of epigenetic research, of course, to prevent cancer and treat cancer. And so I then applied the plant world into this epigenetics over the last maybe 20 years. And that was just fascinating. And for me today, it's just absolutely fascinating to combine the knowledge of thousands of years that your dad had, really, really was strong in it, and then take my background of the hospital medicine, how you called it to me once, and just take the common things that you find on those two, right? Understanding the old world and understanding the new world, and then combine it. And that way you can prevent, or in my world, I cannot do a lot of stuff that people do in modern medicine, which I think we could do much better with the ancient medicine. So this is why I am right now. This was my travel from a hippie to a pretty Main Street physician doing high-end stuff all over the world, coming into this alternative world, if you want. And your dad and I, we kind of almost clashed on each other, because he was from the ancient world, I was from the modern world. He taught me the ancient world, I taught him the modern world. And over time, we found the common ground in the middle. And that was just phenomenal, the experience that we both had. And it made us really, really, really close.
What are some of those similarities with this new world and old world that you talk about?
Well, the plants. I mean, look at the new world. Every medicine you get in a pharmacy is based on a plant somewhere. All they did is take the plant structure, one of those many components that are in or compounds or components that are in the plants, and then they just change little chemical groups around it and make their studies, and this is what you have. There's no single medicine that has not been based on the plant or the plants in general. I mean, you do in silico design today, which is mean the computer does that. And I think in the future, artificial intelligence will do drug design. But even then, it's all based again on the knowledge of the plant world. And when it comes to essential oils, I think, and you knew that, the essential oils are the most exclusive, VIP, highly concentrated plant extract you can get. It's better than, I mean, you can compare it with herbs and other things, but for me, the herb has to be basically taken all the water out, so it has to be dried out, and it loses potency that way. And we know how potent herbs are. And this is why essential oils are so enormously potent, because they still have all the water or the oil in it. I mean, they're still the plant itself. It's just the core of the plant captured in an oil. And it's just absolutely fascinating.
I love it. You shared almost the exact same statement that Dr. Mark Bartlett shared a few episodes ago, talking about how what's fascinating about, essential oils is a lot of modern medicine is derived and tied back to essential oils. It's all based off plants. It all has a tying back to plants, and they built it off of plants and designed it from plants and from, nature's medicine, essentially. So I love that you shared almost the exact same statement, and are really curious about that. So obviously, you were saying that you became extremely interested with the thousands of studies that you found with essential oils. Since being part of kind of the essential oil family and world, what are some key interests that you've found with essential oils? You were telling me something about how you're very intrigued with genes and essential oils as well.
Well, again, I mean, going back to Mark Bartlett, who is a phenomenal scientist, and I applaud Young Living of having employed a person of the caliber of Mark Bartlett. Absolutely phenomenal. And the two of us hit it right off. I mean, we were talking the same language, gene arrays, looking at what turns genes on and off and how you measure that. And then he goes, of course, he's with Young Living now, he goes into what do essential oils turn on genes on and off, and you can measure those things, and what kind of smell receptor, we call those olfactory receptors, smell receptors. These are little things in your nose that when you have a smell come to you, this is a chemical reaction, right? The smell is a chemical, an organic, a natural, not synthetic, but an organic chemical structure that will hit your receptor in the nose. And when it does, a chemical reaction happen in that receptor, and it turns into electric signal. And then from there, the electric signal goes from the nose receptors into something we call the olfactory bulb, or the smell bulb. And from there, it goes into the brain, into like a train main station we call the thalamus. And from there, it's distributed into different parts of the brain. And so Mark Bartlett has done research previously in his previous world with these gene arrays and see what turns gene on and off. And now he's concentrating part of his research exactly on what essential oils do. For example, he has a phenomenal studies together with Dr. Lee in Japan, in Okinawa, that was done together with the Chubu University and the Shikuoba University. Hopefully I pronounce it correctly, where they looked at gene arrays. Again, what does lavender, and they looked also at some other oils, but lavender was a Young Living lavender. Which olfactory receptors does lavender turn on? Now, if we learn that, and we know that lavender has been used for thousands of years, it calms you down, it's good for the skin. I mean, there's 100 things lavender does. The Swiss Army knife is essential oils. But now we can really look at what does it do in the body, right? Which olfactory receptors, smell receptor does it activate? Which genes that then create your olfactory receptor does it activate? Yeah, it's not that simple. It first goes to your genetic information, believe it or not, that you inherited from your mom and dad. And it's going to find that one little gene string, and it will be able to turn it on and off. And so we have talking about science, right? You want to talk about science. We have about probably 400 to 800 olfactory receptors, smell receptors, different ones. Each one is either here for one single smell or for a combination, a blend of smells, right? And so they interact with each other. So we now know, because of the research Dr. Lee and Dr. Bartlett did at Young Living, we now know what is activated by lavender. Now, the next step is we would have to understand where in the body do we have these olfactory receptors for lavender? And that may be a strange statement that I just made, because people will say, well, sure, it's in the nose, dummy. No, well, let's go a little bit with the interview, but make a note to come back to this, because this is something that will open a whole new way of thinking for people that are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, because you you were telling me right before this podcast that every organ actually has a full set of smell receptors, which blew my mind. That's not something that I knew. When I thought smell receptors, I thought the exact same thing, that that's only in your nose, right? And it connects to the olfactory system, to your brain. I didn't realize that every organ, like you said, actually has a smell receptor.
Well, since we had it, let's just finish that, right? So for me, it was fascinating. The first study was in Germany that looked at sandalwood essential oil. And they took us, researchers tend not to take the natural stuff because it has too much variation, right? Sun, rain, whatever, the weather and the time of harvest. So they tend to take a plant and then create a synthetic component or compound of that plant. And then they research that because they have less variation in their research. So they took, synthetic sandalwood. And
it's a more controlled substance.
Exactly. It's more controllable and the results are a little bit more predictable. And you can probably then say, yeah, it's probably more correct. The results are more correct that way. Not always true, because again, they then extrapolate that to the human body, and the human body is non-synthetic. So we don't speak synthetic. We speak natural, right? Our cells speak natural. So it's like a thinking that is not always correct, but it's the way researchers often think. So having said that, there was a study in Germany that showed that when you have sandalwood, that the same smell receptor that you find in the nose is on your skin. Have you ever realized that your skin can smell? And
I think it makes sense now, because I was reading. It's kind of similar to like how smell actually affects like how you taste stuff. I remember reading this study years ago that someone would smell an apple and take a bite of chocolate, but it tasted more like an apple to them than it did chocolate. Yep. And they did a similar test with like being able to feel the food. And it also kind of did the exact same thing. They would hold on to a certain type of food and eat a different type of food, but it would taste like the food that they were holding while blocking their nose. So yeah, that also really fascinated me too when I read about that.
So hold that thought, make a note, because I want to come back to that later, right? Okay. But let's finish this. So your dad and I, you know that because you were very often with us. We spent 2.5 years, basically almost most of the time on Skyrider, right? You were most of the time there, and you rescued me when I got lost with whatever little all-terrain vehicle, ATVs and all that, right? So, and you came and rescued me when I saw that cougar and I thought it was a big dog or a big cat. I didn't know what it was. You came to my rescue, and I remember all these times. But I asked Gary, your dad, Gary, teach me, right? We hear day in, day out. We hear the whole week, teach me. And he would always look at me and said, no, you're not ready. And I just couldn't get it. I said, what does this guy want from me to be ready? And it took almost a year. And after a year, and he just kind of one day said, come with me. We go down to the barn. You're ready. We'll start today. And I said, why now? What did the change? He said, last night we had that discussion about what I used to say on stage, and you always told me not to do, that you don't need to know the essential oil. All you need to do is to smell it, and your body will know what to do with it. And then suddenly I was because when we were sitting there at Skyrider in the kitchen, right on the table, we were constantly on the computer and looking at research, your dad and I, and we were comparing it. And then one day I just saw this research with this sandalwood and the second one, and I showed it to him, and he said, whoa, so we really have smell receptors everywhere. And I said, yeah. And he said, and then I said, oh my God, if we do have smell receptors everywhere, then I don't need to know what the essential oil does. All I need to do is to smell it, because it will activate the appropriate receptor in the appropriate place. Whether you know it or not, it will do it. And that's when he said, you're ready. And then he started teaching me, and so a lot of his knowledge was passed on that way. And of course, you got a lot of that knowledge. And in fact, I come back with the apple and chocolate. There's something I want to say then to that when we come back to that. But so today's research will tell you that every organ system tested has been found to have smell receptors, olfactory receptors, every single one. every place in your body has a smell receptor. That tells you that your liver can smell, your kidney can smell, your heart can smell, your blood vessels can smell, your lymphatic vessels can smell, your nerve, your brain, your testicles, your sperm, your ovaries, everything can smell. So my question to you and to everyone listening to this podcast, why? Why do we have a system in our body where every organ system can smell? There is nothing for nothing. God created human body not just without purpose, right? And if you're not religious and you think now you're upset because I said God, then you take evolution for it. And if you're religious and you think evolution, I said now evolution and didn't take God, then hey, God created evolution, so we're all fine again, right? So it comes full circle. Yeah, sometimes the world is very simple, right? But
it's fascinating, because the first thought that comes to my mind as to why every organ would have a smell receptor. Because if we think about it, you go back and the smell receptors fire the correct genomes, right? And everything that goes on in your body. So it's like a firing system, like a firing order for an engine. So I would almost like the way that my brain processes it is by your body smelling it first, it almost like starts the engine prior to you taking it in or consuming it to get your body ready for whatever is about to happen. And what I mean by that is like, what's a really good example? So like certain energy drinks, right?
Yeah.
There's some energy drinks that like, if they're open, I like to smell them. And certain ones, when I smell them, my kidneys start to hurt. Or I feel something in my kidney. And it's because it actually leaches all the iron out of your kidney. And it's really bad for your kidney, especially with the carbonation. A lot of the carbonation takes all the zinc out of your bones and stuff. At least for me, that's what happened. And maybe that has no correlation. Maybe that's not what it is. But that's what I think is it's almost kind of like a preload for your body before actually ingesting or taking something on.
Yeah, well, I would go even further. I would say we have 2 or 3 different smell systems. We have the one that you just described, which involves your brain. We have one that obviously functions without your brain. It functions, right? I mean, this is also a reason why people who cannot smell, we have plenty of those after COVID now, right? Although most recover, but we still have a bunch of people that have no smell after COVID. They still benefit from the oils. Why?
Yeah.
Because we don't need your brain to be activated. The oils will go to the smell receptors where the smell receptors are. And every organ system has multiple smell receptors. Remember, they are like 400 to 800 smell receptors. And then the gene families, there's 172 gene families that create these smell receptors when they're activated. And so the lifestyle and the environment activates that. So look, this is where modern medicine misses out. This is where your dad was right on. Gary Young had it right all the time without knowing the research, really. He just had the knowing. He knew it, right? Your body has not just a blood vessel system, a nervous system, a lymphatic system, a bone system, muscle system, and so on. Your body also has a smell system. And I'm coming back to the same question, why? The only explanation for that, again, nothing is created for nothing. The only explanation for that is organs in your body are communicating with each other. And they do this through smells, which I think this is the next big frontier in medicine. I think within the next 10, 20 years, the way I see the medical literature speeding up on this topic, I think within the next 10, 15 years, we're going to get the answer. And somebody will get the Nobel Prize for that. And your dad should be mentioned at that moment because he knew that 40 years ago. And he always knew it. He had this knowing. And now research is proving him right. Organs are talking with each other through smells. And so when you smell or ingest or put on your skin an essential oil, it will create a whole reaction in your body where organs are talking with each other, with or without the brain, independent of it. And when you think about that, it may be the most important system in your body. And we are the year 2023, and yet we have to figure out
discover the exact reason. The exact science behind it. No, that's fast. It's fascinating because I remember my dad talking about it years ago, but I was too young to really understand what he meant by it or what he was saying. but I remember him talking about, your skin smells it, your body smells it. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Only your nose can smell. But it makes perfect sense now. Definitely something that we'll have to expand upon. And, 5 years from now, maybe we'll have to do another podcast episode and see where the research is.
Yeah.
Just absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing.
and I want to add one more dimension, something I
Yes.
was teaching you that because this was rather new. I don't know. Your mom always told me, Ollie, don't go on stage and talk about poop. I was always the poop doctor and I made all the jokes about poop. But the microbiome, the collective sum of all your bacteria, funguses, viruses, and everything else in between that you have in your body and on your body, we call the microbiome, right? And so when you look at your genetic information, 0.5% comes from your mom, 0.5% from your dad, and 99% of the genetic information in your body comes from bacteria mostly, some from viruses, and then fungi and other things. So this huge importance of this microbiome. And when I started talking about 15, 20 years ago about the microbiome, the gut, and the importance, even a lot of my colleagues in modern medicine were kind of laughing at me. And this was really the front line in modern medicine. Today, this is central. We know the microbiome, especially the one in the colon, is responsible for the way you feel today, whether you're happy or depressed. It has to do with the composition of your microbiome. 70% of your immune system sits in your gut, and of course is heavily influenced by the microbiome. Now, all these bacteria, the latest research from the last 2 years shows the bacteria themselves can perceive smell and odors and give out different odors. They even play a role in your nose. Your nose has stuff in it, bacteria, right?
Yeah.
They have an odor. They change the way you perceive smells, right? So even there in the nose, they have a role. So it just, this, you can take it like multiple levels further, but I'm just saying, again, there's a whole system that we have not explored yet that may be the most important system in our body. And I believe it's very, very closely connected to what we call the microbiome.
Fascinating. Oh my goodness. Well, we definitely are going to have to do another episode as there's so many more things I would love to talk with you about, from mushrooms to toxin-free living. But I think this is a really good introduction, especially for those who want to get an in-depth understanding on essential oils and the science behind it. This was honestly eye-opening for me. And one of my favorite reasons about doing this podcast is I'm always learning every single time. And once again, really appreciate your knowledge, everything that you're doing, how much you're sharing with everybody. Is there a place that people can go to listen to some of your talks, or do you have a website that they can go to? Because I'm sure some people would be curious to understand more and want to know more.
Yeah, so of course, I have drolly.com, doctor, and then Olly, Oli, the first three letter of Oliver. .com, and you can see I have a store with some books I wrote. One is the Doctor's Guide to Essential Rewards, which is now Loyalty Rewards, but everything else besides the name is still correct in the book. And it tells you when you're new to New Living or when you're already in it for a few years, how you do epigenetics, how you change your life around using Young Living products. And every month we give you 100 PV worth of suggestions. So, and the book is now sold by Growing Healthy Homes, but you go to drolly.com to the store, click on the book, and then it brings you over there and they ship it. And this is where I have these documentaries that I create. I create educational documentaries. And in fact, the world of smells, what I just discussed with you today, I created a half-an-hour documentary on that. And another one that is very interesting is forest bathing and grounding. Also very interesting what you do. And again, has to do with essential oils, believe it or not. So yeah, this is where they can go. Dr. Olly, just follow me there, and then you will know when we announce the little mini symposium, and you'll be able to see probably like a dozen or so videos that I create, these educational half-an-hour videos that I do.
There's so much to learn, and it's going to take years and years and years to understand the exact science of it. It definitely won't be something that we'll learn in my lifetime or your lifetime, but at some point in time, we'll definitely understand the exact science. And I think even then we'll still be learning about essential oils and how they play a role in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just like I'm just in awe about your dad, who was my best friend. I mean, we shared things that we didn't share with anyone else in the world, and just with each other. And just the fact that he had this knowing, and it was deep inside him, and he gave this world a huge gift that many still have to comprehend. They just have no idea. This is not about business. This is more. This is what your dad was about. It was not about money. It's about something that many still have to comprehend, is this system in our body that may be the most important one and yet has to be discovered. But Gary knew it was there.
For sure. Well, Dr. Olly, once again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll definitely be having you back on the podcast soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, guys.
Take care. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Wild Drop. Remember, you can listen on iTunes, Spotify, on YouTube, and our website at www.youngliving.com. Don't forget to oil up Young Living family. This is Jacob Young, dropping out. Take care.